Michael, and welcome to Beyond the Screenplays, What We're Watching, our podcast where we watch a television series week by week. Today we're talking about The Last of Us, created by Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, specifically the Season 2 finale, Episode 7, titled Convergence, available on HBO Max. I'm joined by the Beyond the Screenplay team, Trisha Rand.
Hello, everyone.
Brian Bittner.
Hello, hello.
And Alex Calleros.
Hi.
All right, we're here. We made it to the end of the season. They did it. So some things happened in this episode that I really want to get into. We get to spend some more time with Jesse until he's gone very abruptly at the end. We meet with Tommy. Like, there's just all kinds of stuff happens, and it all boils down to this crazy explosive ending, this kind of cliffhanger moment where Jesse's dead, Ellie's there, Abby's there, what's going to happen? And then there is obviously this kind of little epilogue that is suggesting things for the next season. So we're going to talk about it, and Trish is going to tell me what she thinks any of this means, because as a game player, it's just fascinating to think about all of this. So before we dive in, a couple pieces of podcast business to do. So our season 2 recap and reflection episode for Beyond the Screenplay patrons is going to be available next week. So tonight we're talking about this episode, and then we're going to take a little bit to gather our thoughts and reflect on the whole season now that it's all together and how it reflects on the first season, all that stuff. So that'll be exclusive to our Patreon members coming out next week. If you want to support us on Patreon, there's a lot of exclusive things that we put on our Patreon, including our Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning episode. That will be coming out this Friday, so keep an eye out for that. You get all of our episodes ad-free. You get access to our Discord community that's really great and sweet, and there's a lot of civil discourse, including like talking about Andor. I know a lot of people want to be talking about Andor. There's a lot of conversation happening over there. And it's a great way to just support us also. If you like our podcast, we try to bring some elevated, constructive critique to discussing film and television. And so we'd love to have you as part of our community. So head over to the Beyond Screenplay Patreon to support us and get access to those things. And another quick announcement, we have figured out our summer schedule. So our big swing summer schedule kicks off very soon and includes Interstellar, the 2014 Christopher Nolan film, La La Land, the 2016 Damien Chazelle film, AI, Artificial Intelligence, the 2001 Spielberg-ish film, Cloud Atlas, the Wachowskis' 2012 film, Romeo plus Juliet, Baz Luhrmann's crazy 1996 film, The Fountain, the 2006 Darren Aronofsky film, and Pulp Fiction, a little movie by Tarantino from 1994 that somehow we have not talked about. So that is going to be our summer schedule. All of those episodes will be coming soon. So make sure that you are following us on YouTube, subscribe, like, to make sure that it tells you when these new episodes are out, or follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Yeah. Okay. Now we're going to talk about The Last of Us. Trisha, what do you make of this episode? What was your experience here?
So we're gonna play as Abby now, yeah?
Sounds reasonable.
Interesting.
I mean, it
Interesting
seems
thought.
what's going on. You guys have hinted enough to me that there's this thing that is true of the first game and this one, where there's a perspective shift where you can play as different characters, or you are forced to play as different characters. And so as the season was going along and Abby had vanished completely from the season, no cuts over to her, what's happening, where she is, nothing, truly not even the barest hint of it.
More specifically, Caitlin Dever had vanished, which, in right. TV is a different thing where it's like, this person is here, or are they?
Right. So, yeah, it made me increasingly suspicious that there was going to be some kind of deliberate perspective shift. And and I kind of thought it would arrive earlier than this. You told me early on that there was a very marked midpoint shift in the game, and so I was kind of braced for it. And so then when they killed off Joel in the second episode, I was like, well, wasn't that? And then they like did the red hallway. I was like, well, I guess it wasn't that either. So it must be this other thing that I suspect they're planning. And I like that as a choice. I'm like really fascinated. What a wild video game experience you all have had.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if my dream of the whole season being tied together thematically is being fulfilled in this finale. Like, I think shifting perspectives here is doing something thematically, and I'm really curious about that and excited to talk to you guys about it more. I don't think that this particular episode makes a lot of effort to be a finale in some ways. You know, with finales, we are usually seeing, of seasons of TV, we are usually seeing like almost a curtain call of like, here's all the characters you care about. And yeah, Jesse's back and Tommy's back. But then here's also like this thematic point and this thematic point and this choice that suggests this thing and this idea being introduced that could possibly tie it together. There's some thematic work done here, but I think it really feels like The Last of Us 2 Part 1. And which I guess I should have expected, but not knowing what the midpoint was going to be, I just am kind of like, okay.
But also, if we're not getting season 2 or season 3 for maybe 2 years, like this is a standalone season of television, whether you like it or not. So that's an interesting conversation to have, especially when we talk about the season as a whole.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This show seems interested in conducting the same experiment that the game did in that way. And it's been interesting hearing TV watchers go along and I think overall stay pretty involved and invested in the goings on. And yeah, it's weird as a game player knowing that there's stuff to come and elements of Abby that are, I think it's clear now that we're going to get more of in the next season. Seeing that absent from this season was a choice, and like we said, we'll talk about this more in this kind of season 2 recap of like the kind of structural decision that they made and whether or not, the pluses and minuses to that. But like for this episode unto itself, it is interesting that, like you were saying, Trisha, there aren't a whole lot of those big season finale markers. I think there are things that we've been talking about that they did hit on, where Ellie kind of speaks to her violence nature of, coming out of the red hallway where she killed Nora. She comes back, she talks to Dina. She's like, I thought it would be harder to make her talk. It wasn't. I just kept hurting her.
Yeah.
So that was the first time we've kind of heard Ellie talk about that and say that out loud to someone else. And also in that scene, she reveals to Dina who these people are, that they're Fireflies, tells the story about, they were going to make a cure for me. Joel killed them all. And that seems to sour the relationship with Ellie and Dina to some degree, right? Like after that, Dina just kind of turns over and is like, we need to go home. Before Ellie departs, there isn't like a hug or a kiss between them. So there are now kind of rifts and conflict forming between the two of them. That's interesting. And I want to talk about the withholding of information and that a little bit more. So yeah, it's interesting that there is some of that happening in this episode, but not a ton. Brian, I'm curious to hear from you. What were you thinking as this episode was happening?
Yeah, picking up on that, I did enjoy the episode as a whole. And we've had this weird thing, and again, we'll hold some of this for talking about the season as a whole, but we've had this thing this season where it's like, why was that choice made? What's going on here? Da da da. And then like the next episode or 2 episodes later, like someone will deliver a monologue, or we'll get a flashback or something that's like, oh, okay, I guess that's kind of what was going on there. Or even that little Future Days piece of the song, right, where it feels like things are being told in the wrong order or whatever. But then it's like when those things are given to us, in some ways it kind of can make the previous thing feel more satisfying in retrospect. You know, like I expect I'll rewatch this season at some point, and when I do, I'm hoping it's going to feel a little bit more of a piece, knowing where it's all going. But I think that scene with Ellie and Dina is a really good example of this, maybe the best example all season. For context, in the game, the red hallway scene feels earned in a way that feels gross, but feels like, yeah, that this kind of feels like what we've been building up to. But then Ellie comes back to the theater. She is completely in shock. She has blood like on her face, not just like scratches on her back, and just can barely move, can barely do anything. Dina helps her, take off her shirt and is just sort of caring for her. And Ellie, unprompted, just says, "I made her talk." And like that's there's like a couple lines after that, but that's the entire scene. And it's really powerful, I think, just for Ellie to be like really shaken by what she's done. But then that's kind of all we need to hear her say. The show is doing this totally different thing where it's like when we get the red hallway scene, we're like, that was abrupt and that didn't necessarily feel like what we were building up to, right? Then we get the whole flashback episode. But then even then, it's like Ellie comes back and she doesn't necessarily seem phased by what happened. She's more focused on Dina. Dina has to ask her, hey, you going to tell me what happened, right? But then once she does, then Ellie says, "I made her talk. I thought it would be harder to do, but it wasn't. It was easy." And then that prompts her to tell Dina the truth about what happened with Joel. And I thought that was a really interesting change where in some ways it makes that scene feel big and important and motivated. In other ways, did we need to sacrifice our sort of orientation for a couple episodes leading up to that point, right? So I think that this season, and again, this is probably going to be a 2-season thing now, where it's like now the 3rd season is like, oh, okay, that's why you made us a little confused or a little disoriented in the 2nd season, so that you could save this thing that's really important for this moment or that moment or whatever. I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, but I at least appreciate feeling like there's a plan, right? I appreciate being like, whether or not it was good that we did this thing, we did it for a reason, and here is the sort of the payoff of that reason. So this episode felt like it did a decent job to me of make the season feel like a cohesive thing. But as you were saying, Trisha, I kind of knew, I was like, they're either going to do this season like the first half of the game, or they're not. And if they do, this season is always going to feel like a piece of something bigger, right? Yeah. And we'll have to wait quite a while to talk about that in the bigger picture.
Yeah. It is a grand experiment that they're doing, and I honestly didn't think that they were going to do it like this.
Right.
And so I'm surprised, and I guess I'm impressed by. I think this is a brave choice to tell the story this way. Alex, what are you thinking right now?
At this very moment, I'm remembering the scene you were describing, Brian, where Ellie comes back in the game, more covered in blood, more in like a state of shock. Mm-hmm. And there's so many moments and scenes in this season that they recreate, like, frame by frame, shot by shot, exactly how the game was. And that was a really impactful moment in the game for me. That felt like I was angry at the game for making me hit that X button or whatever in the hallway, but that as the kind of result of it, of Ellie kind of something has shattered in her, in that kind of like words can't explain it way, just that one sentence says it all. That feels so good. And like, so why I think you were kind of using this scene as an example of something that kind of worked for you or kind of helped to like make the season work. But for me, there's something I'm not tracking here, or there's a different journey Ellie seems to be on, and we've kind of pointed it out earlier in the season as well, where it's like it's almost like Ellie is trying to be something. She's trying to be more like Joel. She's like she's not actually maybe naturally like this super violent person, but is like trying it out and like putting it on. And it's almost like the hallway scene is now reading to me in the context of this discussion as like, I tried it on and it was way easier than I thought. And that's kind of freaky. So it seems like there's an interesting like difference in meaning of this arc that she's on, for me at least, where it's like that other Ellie in the game, you know, had descended into this really dark place, did a really dark thing, and then is really shaken by what she's done. Ellie in the series seems to also be shaken by what she's done, but it's coming from this different angle of like, I tried a thing out and I'm kind of surprised at how easy it was. And in some ways I'm actually not as shaken as I should be. And so I don't know, I'm a little just like disoriented a bit with that arc for Ellie. What did work for me though, because this almost played how the game version of the kind of bloody I Made Her Talk played, when she went to the aquarium, and that whole scene, I thought it was really well done. Yeah. And I do think that Ellie in that scene, that was finally giving me that thematic kind of the thing that we all know is coming in a revenge story in a drama like this, which is you think you have this fantasy of what it's going to feel like to get revenge. It's going to feel like you're going to finally put your pain at bay, and then the messiness of reality gets in the way, and oh my God, innocent people are now being hurt, and this doesn't feel good anymore. So that part really worked for me. But yeah, when she came back and was talking with Dina, that still feels like muddy to me. And I don't know. I'm a little disoriented this season in general with Ellie's arc, but I do feel like where we ended with that aquarium scene, that's where I needed to be. And that scene I thought was really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that scene was really good and is similar but a little different from the game. But I think as you're saying, it's orchestrated exactly right to give that really visceral, man, I screwed, like this is not what I wanted to happen, right? So there's the reveal that this woman is pregnant, which is in the game, but then also they tacked on a very stressful like, you know, now this woman is like begging Ellie to like help get this baby out, and it's like horrific. And I was having House of Dragons flashbacks. House of the Dragon. But I feel like that added little bit shows that like Ellie isn't a monster. Like Ellie didn't want this and is like potentially willing to do this insane thing to try to save this person. And then it slips through her fingers and like she can't do it. Like that was intense and very uncomfortable, but I think added the three-dimensionality to that moment and provided the kind of like mind shaking that I feel like we needed Ellie to have, of like dizzying with this complexity of what have I done? Am I going to be able to go home after this and let it go? And maybe after this, like I buy that she's like, yeah, no, we're going, like Dina's hurt. Yeah. This whole, like all this time to go home. And then of course Abby shows up.
Yeah. Yeah. This is kind of what I was talking about with the themes that are present in this episode, which I really appreciated. So I actually think that there are some plottable, trackable points on Ellie's arc here, where she is talking to Jesse about like continuing to go on, and they're kind of having this debate about like revenge and selfishness and the community, and it's kind of getting at all of that. It's a little bit muddy what it all like essentially means. I think one of the things that I've missed is sometimes when we talk about theme, we ask it as like a question of like, what is the responsibility of an individual to the community? You could ask it in that way, if that were the theme that your story were about. But often a theme is best represented in a versus, right? Like this versus this. And that versus can be presented as two clear paths for a protagonist to take. And so at each step on the journey, we see the versus this versus that being represented. And when they make a choice, we understand what it is that they go further towards this thing. That conversation with Jessie, where she is asserting that Joel was her community and he was beaten to death in front of her. And he's, kind of saying, it wasn't right for us. I live for other people. He says that in the bookstore, right? I was raised to believe, to put others before myself. That makes it seem like the thematic debate all along has been living for your own selfish reasons or living for other people. But the way that revenge ties into that, I think, is a little bit muddy. Like, I don't think that the show does a very good job of saying, and revenge is selfish, or how does violence fit in with this? Are people redeemable or not? Is inner violence inescapable? Can people choose it? If they do choose it, is that selfish? I think that the relationship of those themes with each other is kind of messy. Another theme here that the ending of the movie, the ending of the show is exploring is about basically are we all the same? If we all could walk in each other's shoes, would we understand each other's stories? And would that rob us of our desire for violence? That's kind of something else entirely. It's related to this idea of community or like living unselfishly. But again, not explicitly clear how it's tied to it. And so I think that what's here in terms of thematic content is really fascinating. And it's clear to me that the writers are very smart. There are a lot of, these are not like surface level easy themes that you would see in like, a much more like for a younger age group. This is not that, right? This is essentially complex thematic writing. And I think that's what makes it rich and interesting to discuss. But at the same time, I'm not sure how the different pieces of Ellie's arc, the show's structure with this flip in the middle where we're going to be playing as Abby now, combined with Jesse, who gives his life for her, who's a part of the community. But I'm kind of not sure how they're all interrelated. And then meanwhile, we have the B plot with the wolves and the scars, and the show is almost doing like they're kind of the same in some ways as each other, right? Like she sees one of the scars get dragged off by the wolves and she wants to save them, and then the scars almost kill her. So that seems to be kind of doing that like mirroring, like maybe we're all the same and we just need to understand each other better. But it is kind of not super clear in the text how all of that relates to this with Joel and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's interesting. I think you're getting at something really interesting there, because on the one hand, I can the themes I agree are messy. I can look back at the whole series so far and see, Joel makes a selfish choice, you can argue, at the end of season 1, which is I can't live with losing another daughter. So screw community, screw the entire global world community potentially. I need to save this person for myself. Ultimately you can read his actions that way. So I think that theme, as messy as it is kind of throughout the show. But then, Last of Us Part 2, the game, and season 2 is starting to enter this new territory of switching perspectives, walking in other people's shoes. Once you've seen every perspective, how can you really say anybody's the villain here? And that feels like something, when this season ends, it's doing this kind of like what it feels like it feels like it thinks it's doing a mic drop, where it's like, Seattle, day one, like cut to black. And I think that would be more, it would have hit harder for me if we had done more perspective switching during this season even, or there was kind of a rhythm established of, okay, this season's about stepping into surprising perspectives. Maybe we would have gone back to like Isaac more often, or a Seraphite character, and just kind of like, oh, interesting, we're getting different perspectives, and then boom, oh crap, we're gonna get Abby's perspective. Like that's the twist at the end. This thing that we've established we do in this show, the person you never thought you would step into, we're gonna step into that character's shoes, come back next season. And so I think there's a missed opportunity there, where I think that ending could have been like a whoa moment. Maybe it just wasn't that way for me because I knew it was coming. But even putting myself in the perspective of just a person watching the show for the first time, never playing the game, it feels like a weird twist ending or mic drop moment in a lot of ways. It feels, if it's going to be a season finale, it feels strange. If we were just in the middle of the season, it'd be great, because come back next week.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and again, and I'm almost more confused because I'm super with you, Alex, about how interesting I think that theme is of the, like, you know, imagine yourself in someone else's situation. If you knew their whole story, right, you wouldn't judge them. I love that as a theme. It makes Ellie's arc even more confusing about, like, am I inherently violent and can I choose a different path? That seems almost more confusing to me. And the fact that she's doing more soul searching towards that theme in this episode, where she's like, I thought it would be harder to hurt her, but it was actually really easy. That doesn't necessarily seem to be about this other theme. I do want to bring this up because I think it'll help us if we're trying to do a thematic read. When she and Jesse are in the bookstore, the book she picks up, The Monster at the End of the Book, is one I'm very familiar with. We actually have 2 copies in my house. And, it's a classic. I'm sure most of you guys have read it, even if you don't remember. But it's a Sesame Street book. Grover is freaking out because you open the first page and he says, what did that page say? The monster at the end of this book? Did that say there's a monster at the end of this book? Oh no, I'm so scared. And every page you turn, Grover's getting more and more scared, and he's trying to keep you from getting to the end of the book because there's a monster at the end of this book, according to the title that you read. And so he's like building walls to stop you from turning pages, and tying the pages together with ropes to stop you from turning pages, and trying to reason with you why you shouldn't turn any more pages because you're getting closer to the end of the book and there's a monster at the end of the book. And then, of course, you get to the last page of the book, and the monster at the end of the book is Grover, and he's been there all along, and he realizes that was the monster at the end of the book. And the end of it is he's so embarrassed, right?
I was really worried there was going to be like a mirror at the end, and it's like you were the monster all along. But that would be too much for children.
Though, right? The central character in the book realizes that he is the monster at the end of the book. So just wanted to say, and I love that she's holding this book while standing under a sign on the wall that says every story has a moral if you can find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see the thematic work being done here, but I do think it's lovely. Like, it's that kind of attention to detail that, again, I think makes the thematic conversation rich, if a bit difficult to parse.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add to that and say I think a word that both Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann have talked about this season is addiction, and Ellie's arc feeling like it is just. I have to go do this. I want to stop, but I have to do it. And that's how she feels after the Red Hallway. And that's how she feels after the scene with Owen and Mel, although feels like finally she's like, okay, this is too far. And then that's when Abby shows up and then we go from there. And as I mentioned before, the way that the game is structured is we don't really know much about Abby. We just know Ellie needs revenge, and we're like with her, and then we're kind of with her, and then we're not really with her, but we understand like she just can't get rid of this thing, and that scene with Jesse where he's like, oh, we got to go get Tommy, and she's like, no, I got to go get Abby, and he's like, all right, fine, I hope you make it. like, see, like that's your choice if that's what you're going to do, right? But we don't. I think that the two things we've been missing this season are, one, we don't get that driving force that this is all Ellie wants, and she just needs to tell us, like she needs to tell herself, she needs to tell Dina, she needs to tell Jesse, this is what I need, this is what's happening, this is what we're doing. We kind of dip in and out of that a little bit, and it gets a little funky. And then the other thing is, as we mentioned before, Abby is sort of this ghost villain in the game that we're just like, that's the bad guy over there, we have to go get them. In the show, we've gotten more of Abby's perspective and backstory early on. So switching to her, as you were saying, Alex, doesn't necessarily feel like the mic drop it should, because the gut punch in the game for me is like, oh my gosh, Abby's here. Like, what's going to happen? Flashback, you're playing as Abby now, and just like, I just had like overwhelmed with this feeling of like, oh my God, no, I can't believe you're going to do this. And also, yes, that's genius. I hate you. Oh my God. Like, just all of the feelings at once, and knowing at least thematically what the function of that is, right? Not knowing what it's going to be or any of that, but just knowing like, oh, I totally see what you're doing, and I hate you, but I love you. Like, genius, great, go for it, you mad bastards. But since we've had more of Abby's backstory, since we've had other POV things, then switching to Abby maybe doesn't feel like the big mic drop that it should. Alex, you were saying maybe we could have had more POV this season, and it's like, yeah, or we could have had less, right? We could have had, so it's either way. So it feels like the season is trying to do a little bit of everything, and maybe it's sort of a jack of all trades in that regard. And like I said, it all feels like we're seeing pieces of a whole, where this season felt like little pieces that all sort of amounted to something, and then this 2-season arc, I think, will feel like little pieces that hopefully at the end of season 3 we're like, okay, that did feel like it all was doing something, it just took us a while to get there.
Yeah,
you mentioned the addiction thing, and I've heard Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann like bring up addiction in the podcast, wrap-ups for each episode. And I think the thing with addiction, I think a way to visualize and viscerally feel addiction is withdrawals, or kind of like physical symptoms of, I need this drug to soothe me, to like make me feel baseline again, to make me feel okay again. And that was the thing I was missing this whole season really with Ellie, which was, I didn't feel that she was like crawling out of her own skin, needing to do this thing to feel okay again. Mm-hmm. We don't get like nightmares. We don't get, just all these markers you can give us through a film or TV show of like, this person is like deeply suffering, and the only way they can think to relieve the suffering is with this drug, in this case, revenge, killing these people. And so, yeah, it's just, I feel like I've been told a lot of things about this season, but I haven't felt them, except in certain cases where things really have landed. But I've been told a lot and not feeling what I want to feel.
Yeah, I've been kind of trying to parse some stuff in my brain, and that's kind of where I'm arriving at. First of all, I think it is interesting, like we talked about at the very beginning of the season, we see Abby's perspective, we understand who Abby is, and because we also don't know how much Ellie knows about what happened, I realized that I was assuming Ellie knew that these people were the Fireflies come for revenge on Joel, but in the scene with Dina, it's played as like kind of a revelation in some ways of like, oh, these are the Fireflies. They came after Joel because of this thing. And maybe as like a TV viewer, that's easier to like be in alignment on her. But it does speak to this kind of thing that was happening in this season, where we're supposedly with Ellie as our protagonist, but as we've called out before, she's keeping secrets from us, so we don't know as a viewer everything that she knows, and so that leaves some space for ambiguity in her motivation. And there's the overt, they hurt Joel, I want to hurt them back, that you can understand, but also to your point, Alex, I didn't feel that viscerally, and so there's this weird thing where like I don't have all the information, and the storytelling and filmmaking isn't putting me into like emotional alignment with the protagonist either, and the story is clearly trying to play with who is good, who is bad. How do you make that call when you walk a mile in somebody else's shoes? You see their perspective. So like kind of all at once, it's in this murky place where I'm not totally with Abby or with Ellie. I don't totally understand why she's doing it from a motivation standpoint. I'm not feeling it. And the show is kind of making me question whether or not she should be doing it all at once. And it is this, murky, messy, like you said, Trisha, thing. But also I feel like maybe that's what makes this story like last and makes us want to talk about it and analyze it, is because there is, like you're saying, Trisha, a clear thematic argument happening here. Writers know what the story is about. And I think we're used to, in film, it is nicer to have a very clear binary versus it's this or it's that. One of these is the right way to live, one of these isn't. And this is almost like a tornado has come and scooped up all of these things. And the tornado itself is cohesive in terms of, violence, revenge, all these things are in there, but at any given time things are swirling past and it's hard to get a handle on it. And there is this kind of unique feeling that I'm having as I'm thinking about this show, and as I think back to the video game, where it's not as clear as I want it to be. And with this kind of subject matter, I sort of already know what I think about revenge and violence, so I want to know what you think, game, what you think, story. And it's sort of refusing to tell us, and that's like frustrating, but it is bringing up all these things and certainly spawning conversations, and is really working for some people and really not working for some other people. And it is just like fascinating how this story continues to be kind of unsolvable. So I don't know. That's just kind of like, those were all the thoughts swirling in my head as we've been talking about this, of like, it's not tidy. It's not the way I want it to be. And I think it could be stronger if certain things were tidier and clearer, but there is also some ephemeral other thing that is being generated by this story and its storytelling.
I do think in kind of a meta way, it would be wrong for the creators to kind of signal really clearly, this is right, this is wrong, this is the right way to live, this is the wrong way to live, because so much of what the game is about, Last of Us Part 2, is just about, there's like, once you see all the angles, it's impossible to land in a clear space of right and wrong, right way to live, wrong way to live. It's just like, it's too complex and there's too many valid sides to every conflict.
Yeah. And the little line that helped me with that was after, when they get back to the theater, after Tommy, returns, Jesse and Ellie kind of have their final conversation and revisit this sort of subject of community theme stuff. And Jesse says, like, I also understand that, like, if I were in trouble, you would burn the world down to, like, come and find me, which is an addition from the game, but I feel like added like the third dimension to this thematic discussion, that even Jesse is like, I don't agree with you, but I also see that, like, where you're coming from is a place of love too. And to me, that signaled as a viewer that, like, yeah, I don't think this story has a position. It's really trying to, like, just make you consider all the positions. And that wasn't clear for me before that.
Also, in general, I feel like Jesse is, like, really beautifully used. I feel like 30% of the dialogue we get from Jesse in the season is actually in the game, but everything feels like it is an extension of who we know from the game, and it feels like it's being used for conflict or for theme, and just to make us be like, I'm watching these scenes with him during this episode being like, God damn it.
So
you're making me love this guy right now. Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Wish we had more time with him.
Yeah.
And to be clear, I was not in any way suggesting that, like, the show needs to draw some kind of definitive morality around anything.
Oh, sure.
What I was saying is that stories signal the different sides of the thematic debate by making the paths of the protagonist as clear as possible. Like, here's what this choice means. It's going towards this way of living or towards this way of living. And I think that's one thing I've been missing here is, like, I mentioned it earlier on, but if I knew where Dina stood. Like, if Dina had a take on the theme, on any of the themes, then I would know what it means if Ellie's more aligned or less aligned with Dina, right? Like, if I knew that Dina has this moral code of like, I want to go kill all of the Fireflies or all the people who killed Joel, but let's not torture or murder them, or like, let's only kill Abby, right? Like, if Dina had given her kind of like, we're going to go kill Abby and that's all we're going to do because that's justice. If she's had some kind of really clear, like, here's where I draw my own personal lines around this. And so when she pulls away from Ellie in that scene, I know what it means that Ellie has crossed a line that Dina doesn't think is right anymore, right? So again, there's just a lack of clarity around some of the choices that Ellie is making and what they mean. When she accidentally kills that pregnant woman, it's horrifying, in the scene in the aquarium, and then she's crying over the body and realizes that she couldn't save the kid either, the baby either. And then Tommy comes in, she turns around and she looks up at Tommy, and it's like I'm looking at like a 12-year-old. She just seems so reduced to like all of her bravado is stripped away, and she's just distraught over the violence that she's enacted and the tragedy of what has come around her. And so, yeah, I buy that she's then like willing to turn around and go home. But I kind of haven't been clear as to like, again, why this, what's now, what does it mean that she's willing to turn around and go home? Then she's still mad that Abby gets to live, and she's like, I have to make my peace with that. I thought you were willing. You just beat Nora to death in a hallway. And yeah, I know your girlfriend is pregnant now, so you're starting to see the other side of the perspective. But it feels like if the scene in the aquarium had gone even slightly differently, she wouldn't remotely be sad at all. Or she might have willingly shot that person, whether she knew they were pregnant or not. You know, I just like, I don't know. It feels like the choices for the protagonist, I haven't understood what they mean as well as I want to, which goes to your point, Alex, about motivations and what you just said about the murkiness of the POV here. Like, we haven't actually been playing as Ellie in as much as the show is insisting that we have been. And that in itself makes me feeling a little bit hollow about I wanted to be crying at the end of this episode, and I wasn't, because I was like, I just don't have the connection that I wanted to have and really understand what it all means when I'm standing here at the end. And now I'm not even getting, like, I've been playing as Ellie, and now I won't even do that. I don't know, the whole next season I just won't see Ellie, I guess. I just won't see Ellie, I guess, until the season finale of season 3, a bunch of years from now. It's wild.
That's another problem too, is how long it takes to make these shows. It's going to be like 2 years. So
yeah.
You pointed out something really interesting, Trisha, which is Dina's role in all this, because I do feel like there's a missed opportunity in that moment. They gave Dina this new monologue that was not in the game about her family, what happened to her family, and as kind of essentially her just like backing Ellie up unconditionally, with a story about how her mother and sister died at the hands of a raider and how she killed the raider. And I do wish that Dina had not the exact same like backstory as Ellie, essentially, which is like, my family was murdered and I got revenge immediately, but was something more of like, you know, I was caught in violence as well, but it was complicated, or like innocents were the victims, actually the people who perpetrated didn't really get punished, only innocent people died as a result of this, whatever. Something where it's like she has an experience that provides a lens on their mission, which is like, I support your mission, like you said, Trisha, but we're not going to violate these rules, because in my experience, this is what happens when you start to stop caring about innocence or whatever. And I think that would have been really great, because then as you're pointing out, when we have this horrific scene in the aquarium, Dina maybe has, teed this up for Ellie of like, you have now done the thing that Dina has pointed out, like, we will not do this if we're going to remain like the good guys here. You are the bad guy so clearly in the person you love, in her eyes, you are now the villain. That could have been really cool. And so I do wish that Dina was utilized as that counterpoint as opposed to the unconditional backup, who's just kind of like on board.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I think a lot of people don't need this. I think we are a group that like wants.
We're not normal people.
We're not normal
That's
people.
super clear. Yes, obviously.
But I think that, you know, with the eye toward like writing and creating characters, Trisha, you posted something on the Slack a little while ago that I loved, which is like characters are not people. Characters are ideas inhabiting human bodies. And I think that's absolutely true in how you need to think about your characters as you're writing them. And a character is what do they want? Why do they want it? And what are they willing to do to get it? And like those kind of help you understand what this character means. So that like, you know, Batman wants to save Gotham, but he has a line he doesn't cross. And that's why the Joker can like push him to this edge. And like that Batman is unwilling to cross this line as part of what makes him good. And so I understand what it means when he's taking actions or when he's getting pushed to these boundaries and borders. And I think there was a lot of that lacking for me in this season of the characters. I didn't always know exactly what they wanted. I didn't always know exactly why they wanted it. And it was kind of unclear what they were or weren't willing to do to get it. And I think withholding some of that can create mystery and intrigue in the audience's, you know, perspective. But too much of that, and I think you're unmoored and don't know, are lacking in meaning when you want these actions to be meaningful. And so when something happens, as we're saying, instead of being like, oh my God, I can't believe that's what they did, that, oh my God, it's sort of like, oh, okay, interesting, that's what they did. It's a very different emotional response.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like I'm almost positive I talked about this when we talked about Last of Us Part 2, the game, on the podcast, which you can go listen to that, listener, by the way. But it was like the game was controversial in a lot of the choices it made, basically most of which we've seen now in this season of television. But there was something that clicked with me where every time it did something big, I went, oh man, yep. That makes sense thematically. I get it. Like that I understand immediately what function that choice is serving in your story. And I feel like a lot of the frustration was, why would you do that? Are you just trying to make me angry? Are you just trying to annoy me? Are you just trying to be shocking? And I guess I'm tuned in to Neil Druckmann and Naughty Dog, hire me. You know, where I was just like, or it's like, oh man, you just punched me in the gut, but I get it. And even with all the context of having played the game multiple times, I feel like that is lacking in some of the, as you guys are talking about, some of the character motivations and then some of the choices in this season where I'm going, I wish I felt the aha of it all more. And didn't need to listen to the after the episode podcast or whatever to be like, oh, okay, that's why you did that. I guess that makes sense now in retrospect.
Yeah. And yeah, just to underline what you were saying there, Michael, I feel like it's especially me, but kind of all of us come at storytelling with like a narrative theory, if you will, about theme being of central importance. And theme being the guiding way that creators, like the guiding idea that creators can use when shaping a thing. And if you sort of subscribe to theme being at the center of your story, then you as a writer can use it to shape structure, genre, tone, character choices, all the way down to costume design, production design. Like it can be in every cell of your storytelling if that's what you care about most. However, that's not a universally subscribed to narrative theory by any stretch. I just want to say that. In fact, I would say that me personally, but probably all of us here are kind of outliers in believing wholeheartedly that themes should be in every bit of the DNA of something that is created. And a lot of what people come to entertainment for is entertainment. And so like this is, for the most part, I would say a very entertaining episode of television. if you look at the momentum of it scene to scene, I still think it's really compelling, right? There's danger at every corner. There's a lot of atmosphere and tone. Jeffrey Wright's back. Hell yes. Like there's a big storm, right? Nice, good piece of pressure on the characters and the situation. It's all really interesting. And then there's a couple of really slam dunk reveals, some great dialogue scenes where ideas are debated. And then you have this really shocking end. And I don't want to fault anybody for really enjoying this because I also really enjoy this. I just want to say
that's good to say out loud. Yeah.
Right.
Extremely compelling television, really well done. I mean, the visual effects and the production design, really impressive, so far and above and beyond the average TV show in so many ways.
Right, exactly. Yes. So we critique because we care.
Yes.
This is we're here because we like this already. We like it.
Right. And that's a much bigger conversation to have another day, you know, when we do our inevitable What Are Movies episode.
We're qualified for that.
Right.
Yeah.
But I just mean, like, what is the function? What is the
Totally.
function of a piece of art, right? You know, and I feel like what is the function of a roller coaster? It's like, we want your money and we want to give you an experience that is worth you giving us your money, right? Like, and that's not being like derogatory towards roller coasters. I'm just saying, like, that is the sort of like short and sweet of it, right? It's like we made a thing that hopefully you will enjoy, and hopefully you agree that the exchange of you give us money and you enjoy the thing, you had a good time, we get the thing back that we put into it, the end, right? If you attend a philosophical lecture, well, maybe then you're hoping to like rethink your life, and by the time it's over, you're going to like completely reconsider everything, right? Art can be anywhere on that spectrum, and many other things, right? And I always am curious when you're sitting and you're watching a show or you're watching a movie, like, why are you there, right? Why is the thing that you were watching there, and why are you there?
Because you guys made me. Most of the time.
Very good.
Sometimes there's a very
but
clear
I feel
answer.
like for me, I'm always sort of hoping I'm going to get an emotional experience that is unlike anything I've had recently, and I'm going to get some sort of thematic something that makes me consider, you know, my life. Great. Of course, that doesn't happen 95% of the time, especially once you've seen 2,000 movies, right? But I think that there is a sort of hope that anyone making a piece of art is doing it for a reason other than just simply, here is a thing we are giving you in exchange for money in that sort of roller coaster way. So again, much bigger conversation to have, but I feel like something like this, or The White Lotus, or Foundation, or True Detective, or any other shows you can listen to us watch, I feel like we go into those hoping that there is a sort of thematic exchange happening there. Like, I'm going to give you my time and you're going to give me something meaningful and not just something entertaining.
Sure.
Yeah, not just to pass time, but to
Right.
you know, think that was worthwhile time that has changed me in some small
It meant
way.
something, yeah.
And you know, in small defense of our obsession with thematic coherence in things, I do think it's, as a creator, it does feel really important because you can make infinite decisions. There's so many choices to make from the inception to the production to the post-production of a project. And you need some sort of guiding light. And I think having a strong vision of like the thematic conversation, the thematic debate that you're engaging in this project can allow you to like hone those decisions so that when things are shocking or twisty or revealing, they hit in the way that you want them to hit because you know what this thing is about. And I think that's what I was trying to get at earlier with what is the mic drop of Abby Day One Seattle at the end here. I think because there's been a lot of thematic stuff and it's kind of messy and all over the place this season. Ending there isn't like the inevitable aha moment because of that messiness. And I think that's what, as a creator, I want when I do a thing like that, I want it to hit. I want it to be like, you know, the majority of people are feeling something intentional there because we've been building towards it the whole time with all of our choices. And, you know, I think people have probably felt a lot of things, whether they played the game or not, at the end of this episode. And maybe it did hit for them in that really satisfying way. It didn't quite for me. And I think just that's where thematic coherence can really help, is like more of a maybe guaranteed hit for more people.
Well, it helps create meaning, and you want things to be meaningful, whether it's a really deep, emotional, dramatic moment where someone blinks and you understand that that's the key to, the meaning of life in your indie drama, or like the car explodes and you're like, oh man, I know what that means because the bad guy just that's great. Like,
right.
Emotion comes from meaning, and you want that kind of in whatever genre you're working in, and theme is a really great way to create meaning. Is somehow where this conversation has ended up about this finale episode of The
If
Last
you want
of Us.
more of this kind of highfalutin conversation, join us for our reflections on the entire season.
Well, yeah, I'm actually part of me is suspicious that like we'll go to record that and I'll have more specific thoughts about this episode unto itself, because I'll have had more time to like think about it and kind of process it.
Well, the ending is like the ending, which this is, for lack of a better ending. Like, if the ending is where the meaning is created, right? Like, for mostly, like where it all ends up is what the theme is, kind of, or at least what it is so far.
Yeah.
Right.
And as we talked about, it doesn't feel like this season is the ending. I think it's very clear that this is only part of a greater story. And that has been kind of the thing hanging over this whole season, and why it's been difficult to discuss at times, because it really
it's very
does.
Matrix Reloaded, Deathly Hallows Part 1, just
Totally.
sort of like, well,
Yeah.
see you next time.
Yeah.
It's a little bit Dead Reckoning Part 1, you might say.
Yeah.
No, you mean Dead Reckoning, period.
Right.
Right. There was no
Right.
part 2.
There was no part two.
Only a final reckoning.
Yes. Yeah. We're gonna talk about that very soon too.
Yeah.
No, but I think something I want to get really into in the season reflection is just structure, because now that we know what they've done with the season, they've followed the game with this exact kind of structure. I want to talk about how else it could have been. And so, there's a lot to talk about there. My editor brain is very excited.
Yeah. A lot has been unlocked with this.
Also, I just want to point out there's a teaser for season 3 in a establishing shot of the city up high, and it made me excited.
Oh yeah,
so
I saw that.
Yeah.
Also.
I literally paused it, rewound it, and told my partner, I was like, "That's gonna mean some."
I recognize that. No one else will, but that'll be fun to
think I
talk
missed
about
it.
in 2 years.
See you guys then.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to call it here. Thank you, everyone, for going on this journey with us week by week. This has been, I'm glad we got to say how much we love this show also, because I think, we critique because we care. We critique because we can, because the show cares enough to put these ideas forth and put in effort to be more than mindless entertainment. Not that there's anything wrong with mindless entertainment, but this show is reaching really high and is hitting so much. And the first season was just so incredible and like set up this amazing foundation. And I do think when we get the entirety of The Last of Us, the show, all seasons, it'll be a really meaningful, interesting thing to like dissect, and like a cool thing to have had entered into the world. And I'm very grateful for everyone that is putting in the time and energy to make that a reality.
Real quick.
Yeah.
I'm going to propose maybe on our wrap-up episode, we talk about White Lotus season 3 and Last of Us season 2, which is like lots of thematic complexity, lots of ideas, one of which maybe took a little too long to get to explore them all, and one of which maybe feels like it's not spending as much time as we would like to explore them all. That could be interesting.
That could be interesting. People in the comments also have been saying they really want Trisha to watch some of the cutscenes from the original.
I'm willing to do that. I've been really curious, but I have not, because I haven't wanted to spoil anything for myself.
Yeah. So I think we could probably curate some, like, these are probably safe and won't spoil anything moving forward, and getting some comparisons and reactions to how the game does it versus how the show does it. I think that'll be something that's fun to talk about too. So we are going to be recording that very soon, and it will be available next Friday, not this coming Friday, but next Friday for Beyond the Screenplay Patreon subscribers. So if you want to hear us reflect on this whole season and probably reflecting back on the first season and all of this now that we have the puzzle pieces, head over to the Beyond Screenplay Patreon, become a subscriber. You also get awesome things like ad-free episodes. You'll get our Mission Impossible Final Reckoning conversation that will be coming this Friday, and access to our Discord, where these kinds of conversations are happening with a bunch of like-minded movie and TV lovers all the time. So that's on the Beyond Screenplay Patreon. Thank you to the patrons for supporting the show, for making it possible. Thank you to all of you for coming on this journey with us. Thank you to our producer, Vince Major. Thank you to our editor, Mike Worth, and the whole Nebula Studios team. I'm Michael Tucker, and I've been joined today by Trisha Arand, Brian Bittner, and Alex Calleros. And we will see some of you, anyway, for our Mission Impossible Final Reckoning this week and Last of Us 2 recap reflection the following Friday.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.